Hey everybody, we are Martin, Robert, and Francis, and this is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head, rent-free. Hey everybody, welcome back to Snakes and Otters. We're recording episode 15. So fellas, I was internet surfing the other day, and I came across a headline, and I don't even remember what it was anymore. I'm sure it was just clickbait. But it struck me as being a very negative headline about Queen Elizabeth II. And I thought it was very unfair. And I started thinking about her life and what she's been about as queen. And I just wanted to give the old gal a break. It's been quite an exemplary life.
Amen.
It's just amazing. She's been on the throne now since 1953. 53.
Must be 55, 53, more.
And she's been through many, many storms. Many storms. But seems to always come out the other side with a ton of grace and a ton of admiration. So I thought it would be a good subject for us tonight.
She's definitely very regal, and that's not really meant to be a pun. She pulls it off just by her nature, by who she is. And she's a fascinating subject to talk about. She's been on the throne, she's 95, 96 years old. She's been married for over 60 years to the same guy, which is, reason to celebrate there, just for being an exemplar of a successful marriage, one that's been through $1 million worth of difficulties, just by who they are. She's a fascinating subject. She really is. She's a great mom. She's a great grandmother. They call her Granny, which I think is kind of cool.
That's pretty cute.
Yeah, and she's steered that ship of state consistently now for a very long time. The thinking of England without her is still inconceivable to us. So many of us.
Yeah, for our generation.
And those before us, and those after us.
She is England. Though, Francis, I think when we were prepping a little bit here, you had some really neat insights about her early life.
Yes.
That forms that basis of her career as queen.
Absolutely. She's very much a product, as we all are, of her not only of her upbringing, but from her ancestry as well. Two things really define her. One is really two generations before her. During World War I, the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, I know that's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yes.
But that was the surname of her family. It comes from Prince Albert, Victoria's husband, because that's where he's from. And during the war, that is not, they're killing German immigrants in England. They're really treated badly, and George V kind of says, well, maybe this German name we've got needs to be fixed. And he goes to Lord Strathingham, one of his ministers, and says, you got to find me something. And they go through all sorts of stuff, and finally he's in Windsor Castle. When he's writing, he says, let's call it the House of Windsor. And we have to understand that one little act that he did there of anglicizing the royal family has tremendous outburst all over Europe during this time, because it effectively deroyalized. It took them, we're our own little England here, and all you guys on the continent can go pound sand. And they do. they all fall apart.
I wouldn't say deroyalized so much as, this is Robert, by the way, I've been a little silent here listening. I'd say the better way to put that was it brought the royal family entirely into England.
That's it. That's exactly what I was meaning to say. That's exactly right.
They cut all ties with the continent in that sense.
That's right. Which enabled them to be
this is England,
saved.
Here I stand.
That's right. And the people loved it. And that was the firm foundation upon which Elizabeth because her father was not yet married during the war, but he would marry shortly thereafter. Her father was eventually made the Duke of York. He was the second son of George V, but he was the quiet, stammering, stuttering, easily led into temptation by his elder brother, the Prince of Wales, who becomes Edward VIII.
Yeah, her father was never supposed to end up as king.
That is exactly right.
Another one of those accidental monarchies throughout English history.
Yeah.
It must have been a really interesting thing for him to become king, not just because of the circumstances with the prior king and his divorcee wife.
Right.
But when you think about it, Elizabeth is the first monarch to grow up, to be born into and grow up as a Windsor. Her entire life is, I'm English.
That's right.
And entirely English.
Yeah, that's why.
Whereas her father grew up, or he was born into a family that was German.
That's right.
Ruling England.
Right. And
I think that's probably.
And that's why we
plays into
spending
it.
a little time with this, because we cannot underestimate just how English this made them in many ways. And her father and her uncle had to
really
embrace
helped
that.
Bond
That's
the
right.
family to the people.
Right.
Very much so.
In a way that it wasn't there even under Victoria and Edward.
That's right.
Who were very popular.
Very much so.
Edward was very popular.
Which leads me to the other thing that really made her who she is. I think this probably you cannot overemphasize enough, but her uncle, everything AIDS, really does do some bad stuff. By him abdicating the throne, this sent everything that she was raised on and believed on that was supposed to be, you do your duty. And he didn't.
Oh, that's huge.
That
That's
changed
huge.
everything. Because she's
That
alive during this time.
It
She's
has
a
to
child.
Be, it has to be very profound.
It is.
When you brought up in that sense of you have to do your duty.
The only reason you exist is to serve your people. And for you to do something on your own.
And he walks out on
And he
it.
walks it. Now, if you study his life very much, his given name was David. That's what they called him. And her father's name was Bertie. But
Yeah.
they had regnal names that they changed
Right.
when they went on. He was notorious for this. He was a womanizer. He did what he wanted to. Many of his letters survive, and he talks about how he hated the whole royal life. He was very unsuited, and yet his father doubled down all over the place for him to be, because he's next in line.
You know, it's interesting because when you talk about you do your duty, you were born to serve your people. Honestly, I think that's a more modern concept of the monarchy. I don't know that is.
You want to know why? You're exactly right.
I think it's born out of the reaction to this.
That is exactly it. That's where I'm going to go. The reason she is so much who she is had to do with both the family history and what her uncle did as a child. Because when you flash forward into, this is shortly after the war, this is like 1947, she's about to be engaged. She and her father and her mother and her sister go on a goodwill tour of South Africa.
Yes.
And she turns 21 during this time period. And she gives a speech, and you can find this on YouTube. It's very easy. It's not all that long. Where she gives her birthday address, and she comes into her own. They still talk about this is the moment that makes her queen, even before her father is passed on. That she is still got 7 more years before she actually assumes the throne.
Is this her checkers speech?
No. No. This is the one where, and
kind of the opposite.
It's kind of the opposite. It's where she kind of lays it down. She goes, and you can you can listen to the whole thing, but there's a line in it: "Whether my life be short or long, I will always be in your service." That defines her. It was considered to define her at the time, even though it's before she's reigned. And she has lived by those words ever since. And the reason that I think that she wanted that she doubles down on that service is reaction to all the that her uncle put the country through.
Right, because when you think about it, it is unheard of. I don't care what country you're a monarch of. You just don't abdicate.
No.
It's just not done.
Not unless you're being forced out over something.
Well, yeah,
that's
Kaiser
really,
Wilhelm, but that was a very
he's
unique
really
circumstance.
being.
that's revolution versus abdication.
Oh, yeah.
Right, absolutely.
And so, I think that is a very key thing here. For us, we've had, granted only once, a president resign. That was a pretty traumatic event for the country. When you are the head of state, you're in charge. I mean, granted, the monarch is not quite as in charge as the president is,
right.
But you just don't do that.
Right.
And yet, he also, even though he may not have liked all of the monarchy stuff,
right.
in a way he was very old school, being a womanizer.
Yeah.
That's old school king stuff.
I'm going to be the king. I'm going to do what I please.
That's right.
King
England.
King England.
I was waiting for that one to come out.
King
That's
England.
Right. And
Love that.
I think so much of the fact, the romantic, here we are almost 100 years later after his abdication, and you hear a lot of popular folks talk about, oh, isn't that so romantic? He gave up everything for his love. And it is the ultimate act of selfishness in many ways.
Yeah.
Just because he had the right to do it doesn't mean that many people didn't suffer because of it. And it was only the forced
it seems weird
forced
to
talent
us
of his
when we talk
brother.
about what's the big deal about a divorce, and but it was.
It's the abdication.
It sent shockwaves. The relationship even sent shockwaves through British society.
Yes.
It was a constitutional crisis.
It was
for Britain.
I would
Because
gather, this is pure supposition on my part, I have not researched it, but considering that the Anglican Church did not approve of divorce officially, King Henry VIII aside, until the 1930s, I think there's a lot of this stuff tied in here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems
Anglicanism
an immoral
was
thing.
extremely conservative in many ways.
Yeah.
And
Back then it was.
Not
so much anymore.
Not so much anymore.
Marrying a divorcee it strikes him as immoral, and he's supposed to be the moral leader because he's head of the Church of England.
But
right.
you
Well, it
have
also calls into question whether or not any children they have could become the next monarch.
It's deeper than that. It's not because it's the fact that she's an American divorcee is really a surface issue. She was absolutely just unpalatable to everybody she met. She really was. She was very demanding.
Yeah.
She was very all those things that they complained about her is because she was not very royal.
Yeah.
And that sounds harsh today.
And we could go down a whole rabbit hole of the issues about him. They had to sideline him during the war.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh, why don't you go be governor of Bermuda?
That's right.
Stay away from
World War II.
cameras. World War II.
Because he did serve in World War I, as did his brother.
Yeah.
He was very pro-German.
Yeah.
That was which is understandable when you consider the family background,
but
until you realize pro-German here means
pro-Nazis. That's
yeah.
right.
And there's some thought that the Nazis wanted to reach out to him and reinstall him.
That was
king.
Actually, there's a letter that has recently come to light that indicates that was the Nazis' plan, is to reach out to him and put him basically. If they invaded Operation Sea Lion, he would have been their puppet.
Yeah,
and they would have put him on the throne
as a puppet monarch,
similar to the way they did the Vichy in France.
Yeah, and
that's
a nightmare.
And all this stuff would have been known. That's correct, or even suspected at the time. So Elizabeth is formed in this crucible.
Yeah, the Germans. If they had gotten a beachhead in Britain and started with what they did in France and deportations and then Edward overseeing all of that, what a nightmare! What a nightmare!
Well, so to circle back to Elizabeth, who is actually what we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah, but we've laid the foundation for who she is.
So, from what I can see here, all of this, starting with the name. We are English, and that's all she knows. Mm-hmm. She sees her uncle, who is supposed to be king, just run away from his responsibilities.
Yeah. And leave a path of destruction a mile wide behind him.
So then she's growing up, because remember, this is all happening in her formative years.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. She's not yet an adult. This is the time when she's still gathering her own opinions to herself. It's a very formative time for anybody. And so I think this is very key, that you serve your people. And this is one of the things we talked about before we started the show that I absolutely love. Serving in the army, and not just being a secretary to somebody, or being the secretary or the assistant to the prime minister who gets to wear a uniform, a military attaché, or whatever.
You're speaking of Robert Lincoln.
Sorry. Yes. She's a mechanic. She's a truck mechanic. She gets her hands dirty.
Yeah, that is something.
It's not necessarily terribly dangerous. But she gets down in the dirt.
But she volunteers for the Women's Auxiliary of the British Army. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. Does not go into some kind of desk job or set-aside position or get to hang around number 10. She works with other women. They work on trucks. And it's a vital war effort.
Right. Frees up men to go fight.
Yeah.
It's today, if she were... the heir today, she probably would have served in a real unit like her grandsons did, and her sons.
She learns this from her parents too, because you have to remember her father, who is king, and her mother, who is very much one of the things that props him up for his deficiencies, because he has a stutter, he can't speak, he's definitely afraid of being in public all the time. So they really are a team on this. During the Blitz, while this is going on, they don't leave. They do not leave London.
Yes.
And
that's huge too.
It is huge.
And they don't send the children away.
They don't send the children away. And so she's learning all this. That's why. And one of the things that Elizabeth's mother says during the time, she goes, "Now I can look the EastEnders in the face because I didn't leave."
Yeah.
Because they're being bombed everywhere, and she didn't. They wanted her to get to the north. They didn't.
They didn't leave.
That pays enormous dividends, and that's influential to her. They served, we sacrificed.
She never dodges anything.
Not at all.
Elizabeth never dodges a thing.
And I think
she
that's
didn't
where it starts.
encourage the children. Again, we talked a little bit about Charles, and obviously Charles does not make the best impression. He's seen as kind of
he grows on us, I think,
a pointy head, and he's drawn some criticism for his opinion.
Charles is like our good friend that we don't name, but his worst and he's also like that Civil War general that we love so much. His worst problem is that he brings himself along to a situation.
Yeah, but when you start to think about all of these things with Elizabeth, I have some respect now for Charles that I maybe didn't have before.
Agreed. Yeah. I think he's grown on us a lot. He's wizened.
He sacrificed in his own way to he couldn't have at the time the woman he loved, and so he sacrificed. Now, granted, somebody said, "Wow, how's a sacrifice to marry Princess Diana? She's a beautiful woman." But if it's not the one you love, that's a marriage of convenience, and ultimately we see it.
It's a marriage of PR.
Yeah, and they both paid.
And yet, he does not do what his great uncle did, like David. I guarantee you, all that happened with Edward is what is informed Charles that no, you endure this, sir. And you may not like it, but it's your duty comes before that. I think that still figures into Charles,
and even a generation later. I think Grandma would have, or Mom would have said, "You're going to
stiffen up."
Stiffen up. Exactly. But you will be king one day, Charles. Be king.
Like her,
maybe.
Well, I think so.
Like her, he served honorably, and his brother Andrew, I believe, did as well.
He did.
Both the grandsons, William and Harry.
Andrew served in the Falkland War. He actually saw combat.
Yeah. We talked about this. I believe all have been qualified pilots, helicopter pilots, which is dangerous work.
Right. I don't know that her son Edward served in the same way. He's the youngest. You don't hear much about him. But you're right. All the four of those that we know about.
And if I recall correctly, I think William was certified combat search and rescue, which is serious work.
Especially in the air.
Yeah, that's serious helicopter work. That's serious Navy work. I admire that a great deal. Mm-hmm. That's real service. And also with Charles, if you've ever heard of the Prince's Trust, if you've ever seen any of these British TV specials, comedy specials that say for the benefit of the Prince's Trust, that's Charles.
That's right.
He initiated those. He doesn't inherit those from other princes of Wales. That's his thing.
Right.
And he's raised millions of pounds for charity. So I kind of have, in looking at Elizabeth, I have a newfound respect for Charles.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think that comes right from her backbone.
I think our perception of the modern monarchy, because really it's the last monarchy that matters.
Sure.
The one in Spain, inconsequential.
Yeah.
Belgium.
Is Belgium
Sweden.
still have?
I think there's still
right.
Belgium and Sweden.
Yes,
I think they do still have quote royals. That
but
don't matter a whole
I think
lot.
they have even less influence than. Although the one in Sweden, I understand, is pretty popular.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't know that that they would certainly have the impact on the country that Elizabeth does.
Well, she does have a role in the government. We forget that.
She does, but they don't really exercise it very much.
But
she could dismiss Parliament.
Absolutely.
She could do other things. I wouldn't necessarily call it a veto, but she can, in certain situations, lay aside decisions of Parliament. Mm-hmm. Now, I kind of would like to see one of them do it, just to see what would happen.
But it is a constitutional responsibility
for
her to call on someone to form a government.
That's correct.
Yes.
And report to her.
And she can dissolve that for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which her father did, during the war when Churchill first assumed that when they lost confidence with the previous regime, it was the sovereign which provides a consistency from regime
Right,
to
because
regime,
it's
from government to government.
It's a little weird to us because
We
we
don't
would
think
always
that
think that it would change hands only after an election, but it doesn't have to.
That's right.
Right.
If a cabinet collapses, she can call on the party who still holds the seats, find somebody else. We just saw it happen basically with Theresa May leaving
And Boris Johnson coming in.
And Boris Johnson said, okay, form another government, bring another PM in.
I would bet. I mean, I don't know, but my guess is that a change in government is almost always because whatever particular PM has lost favor in his own party.
Yep.
Right. That's it.
Yeah. Theresa May could not affect the exit.
Right.
And basically lost the confidence of the Tories.
And yet Elizabeth endures.
Yeah.
Yes.
She is the consistency from, and I think we maybe, because of our system here, underestimate the value of that.
Well, I think we underestimate a lot because we are so, it's not in our face every day.
Right.
Yeah.
So probably 99 out of 100 or more didn't know a thing about the Prince's Fund. Prince's Trust.
Princess
Trust.
Trust. They didn't know about Elizabeth working as a truck mechanic.
Right.
You know, they may know that the boys, the grandsons, have served because you see that on the news. You know, media today is going to expose a lot of this stuff.
And their service is very recent. I mean,
It's very
Harry
recent.
really
Very
just left.
I mean,
That's right. And
Harry's, you mentioned Afghanistan. Harry's has served overseas.
multiple times.
yeah, in fact, one of Harry's
In combat.
one of Harry's big charity things is the Invictus Games, which is basically an Olympics for veterans.
Right.
And he's even brought it to the United States to participate over here. It's a big deal.
All of this, she probably, more than we realize, has changed what it means to be a modern monarch.
Mm-hmm.
And you could make the argument, as we talked about before, that, what saved the monarchy in England. It wasn't anything that we talked about. She's what saved the monarchy in England.
Ultimately, that's exactly right.
I think
That's right.
she is, because before her, when you start looking at all the things she's done, I would doubt, and again, this is relatively uninformed coming from an American, I would seriously doubt that there would be a whole lot of good, positive examples like hers and what she's instilled in her family as far as serving the people.
Well, her own uncle was the antithesis of that.
Right.
Because
now,
that constitutional crisis, in many respects, is what solidified the monarchy in the end.
Right.
The very thing that it was expected to bring the downfall about is made it rock solid.
Well, because either through good breeding, which is what they would say,
Sure,
or
some of that.
a little bit of luck, maybe a lot of luck,
Yeah.
you went from the low and you bounced back from that, and you just luckily have the right person in the right,
That's right.
place.
And that goes back to your original premise: give this gal a break. Because
Yeah, give the old gal a break.
you don't mess with the queen.
Yeah.
No, even Americans, we love
Absolutely,
royal family.
we love them.
Yeah. And she's had great relationships with many American presidents.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And something else that I found very interesting too, in addition to that, again, that a truck mechanic. What a great job. But she's had relationships with many important personages, the PMs.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost count now.
Oh yeah, there's slew just in our lifetime.
Yeah, just you go from her first PM was Churchill,
Right.
amazingly. From what I've read, she had a terrific relationship with Winston Churchill.
She did.
Viewed him as a father figure. She was very young. Her father just died, and he really treated her with a great deal of respect. And she had good relationships with many. I've heard her relationship with Lady Thatcher during those PM years was a little icy.
Two strong women. I wonder how
Yeah.
that went,
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder how much that has
And
to do with it.
by this time, she's already been on the throne over 25 years. Her silver jubilee was in the late 70s. There's a lot of solidity there, and I can see where there's been difficulties. But we as people, both Americans or British, we don't notice this.
Yeah. But Thatcher's again. Somebody else we could do a whole series
absolutely.
of episodes on. She gets where she is by basically getting her way, but
The Iron
being
Lady.
right.
That's what
But being,
she's
I mean, that's what makes her who she is that solidity of her own. So yeah, it probably was a lot of friction with Elizabeth, but again, Elizabeth is so graceful. It was never really a public thing. It was never anything that you've got to get rid of this crazy.
Yeah. See,
get me
there's
somebody else
really.
to be PM.
I mean, think about it. What scandals do we have? Diana's death is about as close as you'll get,
Well,
and that was just.
Charles's rumored affair with
It is.
Camilla.
That's
we
right.
don't know if that's a fact. But obviously there was some kind of relationship there.
And she had to
But
endure this.
It might have just been friendship because she was married.
Mhm.
And let's face it, even though it wasn't the media that we have today, it's a small country. It would be very difficult for him to carry on a true affair.
Everything that he does is under a microscope.
Well, it is believed that they did have a physical relationship at different times, and Diana did as well with other people.
Yeah.
But that's
Well, and that's where I go back to, he sacrificed to marry her for the good of the throne. They neither one were happy in that marriage.
yeah.
The boys probably the only thing that gave them a lot of joy.
Yeah, like the joke goes, he's an Oprah Winfrey sensitive type. So,
That's
he's got so to a degree, Charles gets a bad rap. And
He does, that's right.
and-
And you guys might remember back in the late 70s, it was all agog about all Charles's different girlfriends that he would have. Nothing ever lasts. Andy had Koo Stark. Basically, as soon as
Randy
Andy, yeah. As soon as Charles finally gets married, all that stops. But there's speculation all the time, like, why isn't he married? Why isn't he married? What's going on here? Why is all these girlfriends? Different things like that. I mean, whether they were or not, it really didn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, they test relationship to a lot of people between the royals, and unfortunately, you have to do that under more of a microscope.
Right.
In the modern
Although
world
for
than you used
Elizabeth,
to.
that never happened. She was never really tied to anybody. Until she became.
She was a woman in the 1940s.
That's correct.
There's a lot.
She adores Philip, though.
They
Yes.
do, and he her too.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great. I mean, even if for no other reason, they have been successfully married for 60 years, and that's a powerful example and a witness to everybody.
I think it's less powerful than you and I or Martin and his wife getting to 60 years, because when you're a royal, especially of their generation, you don't divorce. And it's really difficult to get one of you offed.
Right.
So,
yes.
Elizabeth can't say off with his head.
No.
Not like you don't have that kind of power anymore.
No.
Can't do those bill of attainders and get their heads cut off on the Tower Green.
But they are in love. You can see it.
That's right.
It's
exactly.
what
It's
you
not
see.
just the longevity. It's
how they are.
It's how they are together. That's
Yeah.
correct. And the fantastic Prince Philip just retired from public service about a year ago, 2 years ago now.
And he's
95.
Yeah, they're very active. Again, primarily charity or
correct,
things
yeah.
of state.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Open the supermarkets or whatever you do.
Yeah,
whatever you do.
But they've always been very charitable. So,
Gentlemen.
And they're also one of the most wealthy families in the world too.
Yes.
It's not like they can't do anything they want to.
Right. Well, that's usually one of the knocks against them. They have all that money. Why are we supporting them? Blah blah blah. It's their personal wealth,
That's correct.
but they do not. They don't really flaunt it like some people
No.
we know, who shall go nameless. But anyways, gentlemen, before we forget, this very fine bourbon we are drinking tonight.
I was just getting ready to get there because I was going to say, look, let's raise a glass to the old gal,
To the Queen.
to the Queen.
To the Queen.
Now it's bourbon, not Scotch, so it's not a British libation.
No.
that we're
But we
toasting
are
on.
Americans.
That's
So if she'll accept it in that spirit, 3 admiring Americans,
Well,
If she can accept an iPod from Obama that has all of his favorite music, she can accept this.
his speeches.
Not
his
speeches.
music,
That's
his
right.
speeches.
That's right.
Well,
it's his speeches. Yes.
she does love Kentucky bourbon because she loves Kentucky horses.
That's true.
They have lots of.
And that's
that is
exactly
true.
what this is.
She's
This
an animal
is a
lover.
Maker's Mark. this
Probably
time.
the most famous Kentucky bourbon.
Yeah,
I don't think it's the best. It's good. But
it's good.
It's cool.
It's good. So here's a glass of Bankers to the old gal.
To the Queen.
To the Queen.
To you, Elizabeth.
That's good.
Good bourbon.
She's well worth it.
Which is kind of redundant. Even a bad bourbon is still bourbon.
It's still good stuff, man. Still good stuff.
So, we're coming up on... we've already been over 30 minutes here, so we need to wrap this up.
One last question. What's
Yes.
the future of the monarchy because of her influence?
That's a good question. And I think the expectation has always been that Charles is going to be a failure as king.
I think that's unfair.
I think that's very unfair. Now that I've looked at this a little bit and looked at him, his reign may not be long, but I think he will comport himself with some restraint. Again, he's drawn some criticism for things that he's very much into architecture. He's dabbled a little bit in current events with some pronouncements here and there. I think he'll do fine. I think he'll do fine, and then certainly I think William will do very well.
I think so too.
I
think William is very much beloved, as is his family. But I also think that Charles has, as I said earlier, has seasoned well. I think he has shown himself to be. He will be very similar to Victoria's son Edward VI, who did not reign long, but he reigned well.
Well, we don't know. I mean, given her age, she could go at any time. He's still young enough that he could reign 20 years. That's a good long reign.
Yeah, Edward VI reigned for, I want to say, 12 years. It was
right. It's somewhere between 9 and that Edwardian age. We talked about this a little bit when we talked World War I. That those 19 aughts.
Yeah, that was
about 1910. Very, very interesting time. A time of tremendous change, and he seemed to move astride it well. And he pushed very much for, when we talk about influences of how she lived. He pushed very, very much for British officials to treat people of the empire equally.
Yes.
He hated that racial attitude about India, that old-time racial attitude of the British Empire and the British officials. He very much wanted to see that in an end. And to see the people of the empire treated well, treated equally, treated as value.
I truly
human beings.
That the influence of the British monarchy in things like that, the example you gave, is still very much alive and well. And I think Charles will do just fine. And I think
that's part of his DNA.
Absolutely.
I think they went right from Edward to George to Elizabeth, and it'd be to her.
That's right.
To him.
Yeah. There's a few extras in there. There's Edward, and then there's George.
Well, but
and then there's Edward, which we won't count much.
He doesn't mean it chronologically. Yes. He means
familially.
Legacy.
Yes. Yeah. I think we will be just fine.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
That's right. Well, but then again, just because they don't rule us doesn't mean that we don't appreciate them.
They are our closest ally. And that's
right.
one of the reasons why Americans love them so much. Plus, kings and queens to us are part of fairy stories.
That's
right.
Point.
That's very good.
That's a very good point.
So, for us to have a living monarch that is so close to us, looks like us, acts like it. Well, he actually acts. Even when they act badly, that's acting just like us.
Yeah, and is so well respected.
And who do visit us.
That's right.
They come here, we go there, and I think that even though they are monarchs in the sense that like our president, or you don't just get to go up and shake his hand. And you don't get to do that with the Queen either. But in many ways, they just seem so much more accessible than in the past, than figures in the past. And maybe that's partially because we live in that same era, but we seem to know them better. Maybe that's partially because she reigned as long as she has.
I think that's it.
Partially it's because we see it, because, again, I go to this a lot. The media spotlight exposes everything.
Yeah, and it's a very intrusive media spotlight.
It is. And the fact that you can say that there has not been major scandal attached to her is pretty astounding. It speaks well of her.
Because of who she is.
And so, given that, when you talk about the future, she's laid the groundwork, whether intentionally or not. The only question is, will they keep it? See, that's the hard part. You can lay the foundation all you want.
I think they will. I think they love her and respect her so much. They would not. You've got the next 2 generations that want to carry on that legacy of hers, perhaps even longer.
We hope. Yeah. That's you never know. Because look at her uncle. Who would have thought?
Well, if you go back and look, we could have figured this one out. Actually,
that was unprecedented.
That's correct. To do what he did, that's right. There were certain, but he certainly did not have the love for and feel of duty. That was pretty obvious.
That's true. I'm just saying that anything can happen.
Amen.
But she has certainly done the legwork.
Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.